Kal Molinet. It's nice to see. I get your name right, right?
That's correct, yes. Pleasure to meet you, Mr. Tucker.
It's good to meet you too. I've enjoyed so much your series on Liberty.me on anarchism, and I thought it would be kind of a good chance for us to visit and see if people can get to know you. You're running this uh, class on Wednesdays, right? Third Wednesday of the month, is that right?
That's correct, yes. Every month, as a way to kind of connect with people out there who are not locally located here in Richmond, Virginia, where I'm from. I would say I do most of my activism in terms of spreading anarchy here in the city. So at least it gives a good opportunity to kind of present forth what I'm doing here towards those who are not connected and can't reach out otherwise.
What does it mean to be an anarchist activist? Are you throwing Molotov cocktails at
No, those are commies. Those are status denial. Well, actually, it's a good thing that you point that part out, because I would say, like in the beginning, many years ago, a lot of when people think of anarchy in terms of a lot of these cities, they think Molotov cocktails, they think smashing windows, anti-capitalistic stance, and that was mostly the kind of anarchy I've ever seen, going around the info shops, going around the groups around in these cities. And I would say part of the things that we do here is marketing and turning that around. And I would say we've been successful in that regards now in the past 2-3 years now, and having a good measure of success. Of now we have a lot of local brick and mortar businesses who are supporting anarcho-capitalism. They invite us to host our anarcho-capitalist parties at their places. There's a nightclub who is very much on board, wants to get into Bitcoin now. A Thai's Corner, place that serves Thai food, and very much into anarcho-capitalism now as well. So I would say we've won our unofficial war with the local commies here, with the local Molotov throwing status and denial, and I think that's part of the, I guess, putting the capitalism part with the anarchy part, right? You know, those two have to kind of go together.
Why do you say that they have to go together? Sometimes I wonder about that, like adding capitalism. Does that not imply that you have a plan for the world, like you know how it's supposed to work, and doesn't that contradict the whole ethos of anarchism?
Well, I would say that that the day that the state is abolished, I no longer call myself an anarchist. Right. So until that point, and not so much, you know, when slavery was abolished, right? I mean, there's still tax slavery. You know, the term abolitionist was no longer used. So I look forward towards that ends and means. But until now, I use the word as to denote more of respect for private property, and to look at this more as you would as a salesperson for anarcho-capitalism, as you would as an ambassador, as you would selling any product or message. And I think we have to do this very smartly and cleverly, and very in terms as you market any product. And the product that we're putting forth is freedom. And I think it behooves us then to look at this as you would at any capitalistic venture, and putting that forth and out there.
Well, that's the capitalist part. What about the anarchist part? Why do you think it's important that people imagine a world without the state, as versus just cutting back the state, for example?
Well, yeah, cutting back the state. I don't look at compromising ethics, compromising virtues. What do they say? Don't negotiate with terrorism. Well, I mean, you look at the past 200 years of attempts in trying to achieve freedom through voting, through reforms, through politics, and the fact that you and I, and those listening to this show, were born as tax slaves implies that all those efforts have failed. And so, looking at that, I don't mean to continue to try to attempt to reel back the state. I think alternatively, there's something that we can do, and towards creating our own community outside of the state, and go in that direction. Socially ostracize politics and voting and government, and go towards one that's more virtuous and in line with our values.
Do you ever have a problem in defining the state? Like, some people think that if you have for example, an agreement among homeowners in a subdivision, and there's dues that you pay with your mortgage to that's very state-like. Where do you draw the line? Do you think there's a strict distinction between the state and non-state institutions?
Well, as it stands right now, the state infects everything. You know, you can't. It's in our language, it's in our words, it's in when you go outside, and a lot of the things that you do in terms of commerce. It's all over the place. So there's nothing I would say that's kind of untouched by the state and trying to corrupt it. especially our language and words. The millennials, there's a good reason before they came out they can't differentiate between capitalism and socialism going back and forth. So I would say that I always use golf course communities. I know there's a home association community. I use that always as an example. When you end the monopoly of a community, like here in the tax form of Virginia, there's a monopolized community. You end the state, you have thousands of competing communities catering to your lifestyle and preferences. So you could have your homeowners association community with those brochures, with those contractual agreements, consensual agreements, versus the non-contractual, relationship you have with government and the forced community that they imposed upon you. So I would say that, yeah, absolutely. Homeowners associations, they're kind of examples of that. I use in Florida, they're very specific in their preferences in terms of people who are much older, like 55 and older communities. They have 65 and older communities. They have their preference in those particular areas, and that's what the contract agrees to. And I think that's pretty cool. That's awesome.
And you've got the whole digital world too out there. One of the striking things, one of the things I don't really understand is how it is that we could live in a digital age where there's basically anarchism in cyberspace everywhere, its own set of laws, its own set of associations and order, and yet you see ongoing innovation, prosperity taking place, and yet the lesson seems to be largely lost on people. The biggest experiment in anarchism in the history of the world has been insanely successful, and yet people still don't recognize it.
Actually, yeah, that is a good point. I guess you could start off with the first AOL group chat rooms or the first Yahoo chat rooms. No one's forcing you to go in any particular chat room. Those are voluntary. You can't force someone to go into the alternative chat room versus one if you want to talk about video games. They're very much in control of those choices. Yeah, that is a good reflection of anarchy in regards to how you associate yourself with others and who you don't want to associate yourself with. I think that's very important. Like, for example, people talk about cannabis. We're talking about belittling the government or bringing it back down some. And for me, I don't advocate for, I guess, legalization or criminalization or any of that stuff. 75 years to finally have the freedom to smoke a plant, for me, it's not a measure of success, right? One step forward to have the freedom that should have been yours by birth to begin with, but to have lost so many others in the same amount of time is a sleight of hand distraction. It's your bread and circuses. It's deceives and tricks people and misleads them to believing that politics could possibly set you free. And that's the opposite direction where I want to go.
Let me ask you about your own ideological heritage and background. People usually come from the left, or they come from the right, or somewhere. What about your own intellectual journey? How did that take place?
I would say the first government I fought was my father. I would say that would be my Father's Day cartoon. Thanks for being the first government I abolished there. I would say kind of grew up with a lot of anti-authoritative dislike and distrust of people just because they're older than you growing up. So I would say it comes from that for myself. Very distrustful of people, very distrustful of their intentions, and just sitting my way forth in that direction. I would say maybe the only validating book that was, I guess, expressively delightful to finally come across would have been The Fountainhead. I was 18. I really enjoyed that, carving out your own road, your own path, uncompromisingly, with your integrity intact. That was refreshing to see. And I would say I was an objectivist until I met other objectivists. And I took much pleasure, I guess, at the time, thinking I was the only one, until I got on Facebook, and I was like, well, I don't know if I really want to associate myself sometimes with some of them now. But
I think you say that about anarcho-capitalists, too.
Yeah, that's very true. That's very true. Now that I have a good idea how a lot of them react online, it's like, I'm not quite sure.
Yeah.
So that is difficult. So I guess trying to be righteous, trying to do the right thing. Comic books, I guess, helps lead to that. Always trying to fight the villains, always trying to do the right thing.
Well, what is the book that you like to recommend as what? I mean, as far as I'm concerned, there's no perfect book, and there never will be, right?
Absolutely, I agree.
But if you had to just name one reading that you think would really steep everybody in this worldview, which one would it be for you?
Yeah, I'll be honest. I've gotten a lot of my friends to read The Fountainhead. Um, minus his IP terrorism attacks.
I was about to say, I mean,
minus, well, I think from that, minus Ayn Rand's, I mean, you can be selfish in helping others, right? And so I look as helping my community selfishly, them being in a better place off will at some point redirect and help me off. The better my community, the better my environment and my surrounding, the better that they reach towards independence and getting off being dependent on the matrix, being dependent on the state, the better off we all will be when those kind of interactions start to connect. So I believe you can be selfish in that regards as well. It doesn't have to be just self-interest. Your self-interest could also include others in helping them as well. Could help you as well.
Now, to an issue concerning this issue of power and the state, obviously the state is the most entrenched and imperialist and destructive form of power. Does your anarchism extend to suspicion of other forms of social power, for lack of a better term, or all kinds of authority? And do you think that the thing you're battling is the state, or is it a more general problem of power? I suspect I know your answer.
The state. I think anything else is a distraction. I think a lot of people have who look at corporations as the enemy. For example, you're chasing after Dr. Frankenstein's monsters. Dr. Frankenstein himself, I want to shut down and abolish. And then the government has done a really good job in using them as their scapegoats for a lot of the problems that they themselves create. Right. So yeah, you end the state, everything else will come out peacefully. As there has been many historical examples to show when, like the Wild West was not so wild, and the contractual parties that they put together before they set out west to cattle ranching and mining operations. So I think it's the misbelief that you could do it through a state. I think that's a potential problem, and that's something that most people though haven't really objectively defined for themselves. And not so much they haven't really taken a moment to define a lot of the words that they use as well. And so even though the state is ultimately the enemy, I think it's mostly, I guess in terms of some of the stuff that they bring back towards you to kind of distract you in terms of different centralization of powers, different kinds of corrupting powers out there. Sometimes the statistics that they put forth kind of splinters everyone off. Like they'll say, well, this group of people are more freedom-orientated, these ones are not. And the ones that I always find troubling are the ones where they say, well, males are a lot more freedom-orientated because they advocate more for legalization of cannabis, whereas females are not because they advocate for continue to be criminalized. But of course, none of these people that they selected in this sample has ever been presented the third option of the argument against the state. So I can't really say it's completely unbiased in that regards.
Right. Well, the state is divisive in that way. It loves to turn people against each other and slice and dice the population. And I appreciate your conviction here, which is essentially that society works. Without a state, there's still be problems left in the world, but you can at least have a mechanism in place to work them out. And
right. I want problems. I want problems. I don't want utopia. When people say, so you advocate for utopia, not at all. I want there to be problems, but I want there to be ways that we can still upgrade, new versions, updates, ways to find a plurality of non-violent solutions that everybody apply, and then head in that direction, right? Problems are good. That just means that there's another way to make it better, to improve upon it. I'm not satisfied with everything here in the present. I like to see what the future is like, but the state does a very good job in keeping us all in the past, especially architecturally. They have a lot of their commission boards that says, well, you can't change the panel of your house, you can't change the window, we have to live in the past. We have to be very sentimental about our statism.
What you're saying is true across the board in terms of the past. I mean, the state always rules the past. It's never really thinking about the future. It's always freezing things in place. Architecture is a great example, but I'm staying right now in a hotel that has a dreadful sink and shower, for example. totally, just because of the state. I mean, there's no reason for this. So they've rationed the water.
Right.
Yeah.
Unnecessarily so, yeah, and those costs could have better been spent elsewhere. Other improvements, a lot of regulations and overhead costs that make it difficult sometimes to do the things you want to do.
Now, during your seminars, do you enjoy taking questions and debating people? Is that part of what you like?
Absolutely, yeah. I would say that's the meat and bones of what I do a lot here in Richmond. The series I do here in Richmond is called Spreading Anarchy, and so I do a lot of debating with on the street with a lot of I'll say by now probably 500 individuals. Probably 250 of those interviews are debating recorded on YouTube, and I would say that that kind of stuff I feel kind of behoove us all to kind of understand and learn and wield. I think our strongest weapon against the state are our arguments, and to wield them proficiently against the fallacies of left and right-wing politics.
When you do this, do you wear a shirt that causes people to come up to you and say, "Look, that's a crazy idea"?
No. No, yeah, you could. I have some friends who say that. I have a table and I have my literature, the pamphlets of anarchy, agorism, all this stuff, and I have a sign that says, "Ask me how government is immoral." So I invite the question. I invite the challenge. I invite the debates. I'm not in your face. I'm not coming at you. You came to me, and most people who do so then out of curiosity or out of humor. Best place to have a good discussion. They're already kind of open. Defense is kind of lowered. Not sure what they're getting involved into. And then I find that to be the best way to introduce the argument against the state. And I would say a majority, over 95%, agree at the end of the conversation. Yeah, that makes total sense. They can't find any logical way outside of that argument.
Of a thing that happened to me. A socialist activist who was carrying a sign that said something like "Ask me about socialism," and of course, couldn't resist that, and got into a quick debate with him about it. But I remember at the time thinking, why aren't there people on our side who do this? And now I find out that there are. So congratulations to you. That's really exciting.
No, that's the first time I went out, I thought I would have a lot of people say, "No, get the hell out of here," try to curse me out. But that's not what ended up happening. And over time, I've made a lot of friends to that. Over time, we have now we have 75 ANCAPs here, legit ANCAPs. None of the minarchism back and forth sort of stuff. We have local businesses supporting us. We have I find that as a measure of success to kind of reach out within our own community. And most people think, well, change is going to happen through politics in the White House in D.C. and places you've never been to. And no, it starts, within yourself, within your own interpersonal relationships, and then when you're ready, the neighbors that live around you in your own community, and go out there and start inviting the question and inviting the discussion.
Yeah, I think I'm sure you're aware of the great intellectual Murray Rothbard. But he would have been thrilled to he was a friend of mine, and I just know he would have been thrilled to have met you and would have cheered you on.
That means a lot. I think I saw your play once, I think at his birthday party, during an Ayn Rand sketch, actually.
I was playing Nathaniel Brandon, who recently passed away. He's a great man. I played him in his old incarnation as an intolerant enforcer, but he changed over the years. So. Well, Kal, it's a pleasure to meet you, and you the seminar that you do. It's open to the public, so anybody can come. You can watch the schedule on liberty.me and register and show up and have fun debating anarchism.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you so much for this opportunity, Jeffrey Tucker.
Well, it's my pleasure to be here with you, and I look forward to seeing you very soon again.
Absolutely. You take good care.
Okay, all the best.
Ever seen going around the info shops, going around the groups surrounding these cities, and I would say part of the things that we do here is marketing and turning that around, and I would say we've been successful in that regards now in the past 2-3 years now, and having a good measure of success. Of now we have a lot of local brick and mortar businesses who are supporting anarcho-capitalism. They invite us to host our anarcho-capitalist parties at their places. There's a nightclub who is very much on board, wants to get into Bitcoin now. A Thai's Corner, place that serves Thai food, and very much into anarcho-capitalism now as well. So I would say we've won our unofficial war with the local commies here, with the local Molotov throwing statists in denial. And I think that's part of the, I guess, putting the capitalism part with the anarchy part, right? Those two have to kind of go together.
Why do you say that they have to go together? Sometimes I wonder about that, like adding capitalism. Does that not imply that you have a plan for the world, like you know how it's supposed to work, and doesn't that contradict the whole ethos of anarchism?
Well, I would say that that the day that the state is abolished, I no longer call myself an anarchist here in the city. So at least it gives a good opportunity to kind of present forth what I'm doing here towards those who are not connected and can't reach out otherwise.
What does it mean to be an anarchist activist? Are you throwing Molotov cocktails at
No, those are commies. Those are statist denial. Well, actually, it's good thing you point that part out, because I would say, like in the beginning, many years ago, a lot of when people think of anarchy in terms of a lot of these cities, they think Molotov cocktails, they think smashing windows, anti-capitalistic stance, and that was mostly the kind of anarchy I read.
Kal Molinet. It's nice to see. I get your name right?
That's correct, yes. Pleasure to meet you, Mr. Tucker.
It's good to meet you, too. I've enjoyed so much your series on Liberty.me on anarchism, and I thought it would be kind of a good chance for us to visit and see if people can get to know you. You're running this class on Wednesdays, right? Third Wednesday of the month, is that right?
That's correct, yeah. Every month, and as a way to kind of connect with people out there who are not locally located here in Richmond, Virginia, where I'm from. I would say I do most of my activism in terms of spreading anarchy, right? So until that point, and not so much, when slavery was abolished, right? I mean, there's still tax slavery. The term abolitionist was no longer used. So I look forward towards that ends and means. But until now, I use the word as to denote more of respect for private property and to look at this more as you would as a salesperson for anarcho-capitalism, as you would as an ambassador, as you would selling any product or message. And I think we have to do this very smartly and cleverly and very in terms as we market any product. And the product that we're putting forth is freedom. And I think it behooves us then to look at this